Story 1. The sign shouldn't have been there. That was the first thing Deputy Aaron Hale noticed. Mile marker 42, on Blackwood Road, had always been a straight stretch of asphalt cutting through dense pine forest outside the small town of Ashford County. No exits, no side roads, no gas stations, just trees and silence. But on October 14th, at 2:17 a.m., a 911 call came in. A woman whispering, crying, "I took the last exit. I shouldn't have taken it. There's something wrong." Then static. Then nothing. Dispatch traced the cell ping to Blackwood Road. But there was no exit. The scene. When Deputy Hale arrived, fog rolled low across the pavement. His headlights sliced through it, illuminating the reflective mile marker sign. He slowed. That's when he saw it. Faint tire marks veering sharply off the road into the tree line. There was no visible dirt path. No gravel driveway. Just pine needles and thick underbrush. But the tracks were real. Fresh. Hale radioed in. Possible vehicle off-road near 42. No visible access road. Request backup. He stepped out of the cruiser. The forest was silent. Too silent. The vehicle. 50 yards into the woods, they found it. A silver Toyota Camry, hazard lights blinking weakly. Driver's side door open. Keys still in ignition. Engine off. No blood. No signs of struggle. No driver. Registration returned to Emily Carter, 29, a nurse at Ashford Regional Hospital. Single. No criminal history. No known enemies. Her phone was gone. The call log. Back at the station, investigators pulled her recent activity. She'd left work at 1:36 a.m. Clocked out. Security footage showed her walking calmly to her car. Nothing unusual. Her route home did not include Blackwood Road. It was a longer, isolated detour. Why would she take it? Then dispatch replayed the 911 audio. The whisper again. "I shouldn't have taken the last exit." There was no exit. The town reacts. By morning, Ashford County buzzed with rumors. Blackwood Road had a reputation. Locals said it used to be part of an abandoned highway project decades ago. Construction halted. Land disputes. Accidents. Urban legend claimed there was once a temporary construction exit that was never officially mapped. But that was 30 years ago. It had long been removed. Officially. The second vehicle. 2 nights later, it happened again. A delivery driver for North Route Logistics failed to return from his late shift. His truck was found near mile marker 42. Same pattern. Tire tracks veering into the woods. Driver's door open. No signs of struggle. No blood. No body. But this time, something else was found. A road sign lying face down among the pine needles. Deputy Hale flipped it over. It read, "Exit 42B, temporary detour." The paint was new. Reflective. Recently installed. But there was no record of any roadwork in that area. Surveillance review. Investigators checked highway traffic cameras. Between midnight and 3 a.m., there were occasional distortions. Static flickers. Brief digital interference. At exactly 2:03 a.m. on the night Emily disappeared, a frame captured something strange. For half a second, just beyond mile marker 42, headlights appeared turning sharply right. Into darkness. Then gone. The next frame showed nothing. No road. No sign. The mapping anomaly. County engineers were called in. They ran satellite overlays. Topographic surveys. LiDAR scans. Nothing showed an exit. No hidden gravel path. No old construction remains. No cleared land beyond the tree line. But the tire tracks were real. 2 vehicles had left the road. Both in the same spot. Both between 2 a.m. and 2:20 a.m. The third call. On October 19th, at 2:11 a.m., another 911 call came in. A man this time. Breathing heavily. "I see it. The sign. It wasn't here before. I'm turning around." A pause. "No, there's a ramp. There's actually a ramp." The call cut off mid-sentence. Location ping. Mile marker 42. Deputy Hale didn't wait for backup this time. He drove fast. Too fast. Fog thicker than before. He approached the marker slowly. And for just a split second, he saw it. A reflective green sign beyond the shoulder. Exit 42B. An arrow pointing right. His headlights flickered. Static crackled through his radio. Then the sign was gone. There was only trees. And darkness. The forest search. Search teams combed the woods at dawn. This time, they expanded the perimeter. And they found something new. About 70 yards into the forest, the pine trees stopped abruptly, as if something had once cleared the land in a wide arc. But nature had grown back unevenly. Beneath the needles, ground-penetrating radar detected something. A layer of asphalt. Buried. Old. Cracked. But unmistakably a roadway. The buried ramp. Excavation began. Within hours, the truth emerged. There had once been an exit ramp. Unfinished. Abandoned mid-construction. Covered deliberately decades ago when funding collapsed. Officially sealed. Maps updated to remove it. But someone, recently, had uncovered part of it. Just enough. Not physically, but digitally. The digital reconstruction. Tech analysts re-examined traffic camera feeds. They enhanced the distortion frames. Between the static bursts, something became visible. A faint overlay. Like augmented reality. An image of a ramp that didn't physically exist anymore. And the sign. Exit 42B. Superimposed over live footage. The chilling discovery. Then they found Emily's phone. Not in the forest. Not near the car. But 3 miles down an old decommissioned construction road connected to the buried ramp. Its last GPS coordinates showed her vehicle turning onto something labeled 42B temporary access, active. But that label didn't exist in any official navigation database. Someone had inserted it into digital mapping systems. The pattern. Investigators noticed something terrifying. All 3 victims had recently updated their navigation apps. All 3 had accepted a suggested faster alternate route. All 3 were redirected to Blackwood Road between 2 a.m. and 2:20 a.m. The exact window when traffic cameras experienced distortion. The question, was someone hacking GPS systems, projecting fake exits, luring drivers off-road? And if so, where were the bodies? As Deputy Hale stood at the edge of the buried ramp that evening, he felt the weight of something larger. This wasn't random. By sunrise, the buried ramp was no longer a rumor. It was real. Yellow tape surrounded the excavation site at mile marker 42. Floodlights illuminated the exposed strip of cracked asphalt that curved downward into dense woodland like a fossilized vein. Deputy Aaron Hale stood at the edge of it, hands on his hips, staring. The ramp hadn't simply been abandoned. It had been erased. County Engineer Martin Feld confirmed it. Records show construction began in 1989. It was meant to connect Blackwood Road to a planned industrial park. What happened? Hale asked. Funding collapsed. Environmental disputes. A fatal construction accident. Feld hesitated. The project was sealed and removed from official maps in '92. Sealed, but not destroyed. The digital phantom. Back at the station, the cybercrime unit worked non-stop. They pulled metadata from Emily Carter's recovered phone. Her navigation app history showed something deeply unsettling. At 1:58 a.m., it recalculated her route home. A pop-up appeared. Faster route available. Save 6 minutes. She accepted. The alternate route led directly to Blackwood Road. Then, at exactly 2:06 a.m., the map displayed a turn instruction. Exit 42B, temporary access, active. That label did not exist in the public mapping database. It had been injected. But how? Tech analyst Priya Shah leaned over her keyboard. This isn't random malware, she said. Someone accessed a high-level mapping layer. This looks like a test environment overlay, like something used by transportation planners. Hale frowned. You're saying whoever did this has access to infrastructure-level mapping systems? Priya nodded slowly. Or they built a convincing imitation. The dead zone window. Further analysis revealed something chilling. Between 2 a.m. and 2:20 a.m., cellular data packets near mile marker 42 showed abnormal routing patterns. Not outages. Redirection. Phones entering that stretch were briefly handed off through a spoofed signal source before reconnecting to normal towers. During that 20-minute window, a false digital environment could be projected onto navigation apps. In simple terms, for 20 minutes each night, someone created a fake exit that only existed on screens. And drivers trusted it. The hidden facility. Excavation continued down the ramp. 50 yards in, search crews uncovered something else. Concrete foundations. Rectangular. Deliberately buried. The remains of a structure. Sheriff Dalton joined Hale as they walked along the exposed path. This was more than an exit, Dalton muttered. It led somewhere. They cleared debris until a rusted steel door became visible. Locked. Sealed with welding marks. It had been closed intentionally, breaking the seal. When the door was cut open, stale air rushed out. Flashlights pierced the darkness. Inside was a small underground operations room. Old wiring. Obsolete computer racks. Control panels coated in dust. And in the center, a much newer workstation. Clean. Recently used. A laptop dock. Portable router. Battery packs. Whoever was manipulating exit 42B had been working from here. The logs. Forensics swept the room. They recovered a portable hard drive hidden beneath a false floor panel. Inside were logs. Not of victims, but of routes. Hundreds of route simulations. Timestamps matched the 2 to 2:20 a.m. window. The simulations tested traffic density thresholds, weather conditions, signal interference timing, driver behavior patterns. This wasn't random abduction. It was experimentation. The fatal accident in '89. Hale requested the original construction accident file. One worker had died during the project. Name, Caleb Mercer. Age 34. Occupation, systems engineer contracted to develop early traffic routing software for the industrial park. Cause of death, crushed during equipment malfunction. But Hale noticed something odd. Mercer's son, Daniel Mercer, had later pursued computer engineering, and currently worked for North Route Logistics, the same company whose driver disappeared second. Connecting the dots, Priya dug into Daniel Mercer's employment history. He specialized in autonomous routing algorithms. He had access to large-scale mapping APIs. He had the skill set. He also had motive. His father died during a project that was abruptly abandoned and buried, and now someone had resurrected that abandoned ramp digitally. Hale felt the pieces aligning. This isn't about killing randomly, he said quietly. It's about finishing something that was shut down. The breakthrough. Then came the breakthrough. A thermal drone sweep of the forest beyond the ramp detected something unusual. Heat signatures underground, deeper than the operations room. Another chamber, bigger, hidden beneath layers of soil and tree roots. Excavation crews moved carefully, and by dusk, they uncovered it. A secondary underground facility. Unlike the first room, this one was active. Powered by generators. Ventilated. Inside were 3 vehicles. Emily's Camry, the delivery truck, and the third victim's sedan. All parked neatly. Empty. The real horror. There were no bodies, but there were signs of occupation. Cuts. Food supplies. Water filtration systems. Surveillance monitors. It wasn't a killing site. It was containment. A controlled environment. On one wall, a whiteboard held handwritten notes. Behavioral response study, phase 3. Digital trust threshold analysis. Completion required. Completion of what? Daniel Mercer. By midnight, a warrant was issued. Daniel Mercer was picked up at his apartment without resistance. Calm. Composed. He didn't deny knowing about the ramp. He didn't deny creating exit 42B. But when asked about the missing people, he smiled faintly. They're not missing, he said. They're participating. Hale felt a chill crawl up his spine. Participating in what? In proving a point. The interrogation. Daniel explained his philosophy coldly. People trust digital directions blindly. They surrender judgment to algorithms. His father died building infrastructure meant to guide human movement. Then the project was erased. Forgotten. Daniel believed the system needed to be tested. If a fake exit appears, he said, how many people will follow it without question? 3 had. So far. Where are they? Hale demanded. Daniel leaned back. They're safe. Where? Finishing the route. The deeper chamber. Search teams expanded excavation beyond the second chamber. And that's when they found it. A sloped tunnel extending deeper underground. Newly reinforced. Lights running along the ceiling. At the end of it, voices. Faint. Alive. Rescue teams moved in carefully. Inside a controlled subterranean corridor, they found them. Emily, the delivery driver, the third caller, all alive, confused, but unharmed. Daniel had intercepted them at the ramp's end using staged mechanical barriers and blinding lights. He'd convinced them they were part of a psychological experiment, that they'd already proven how easily digital systems could redirect human behavior. He kept them long enough to gather data, then planned to release them, to expose the vulnerability publicly. The truth, Daniel wasn't a killer. He was something arguably more dangerous, an ideologue. He believed exposing blind trust in digital infrastructure justified deception, even abduction. He never intended to murder, but he had no problem terrifying, no problem manipulating, no problem proving that if a sign says exit, most people won't question it. As Daniel was led away in handcuffs, Hale looked back at the buried ramp. It had been resurrected as a test, a demonstration, a warning. The forest would reclaim it again soon. The asphalt would be crushed permanently, and this time, no digital ghost would bring it back. But Hale couldn't shake one final thought. Daniel proved how easy it was to create a false exit, and how quickly people follow it. The ramp was sealed again, the underground chambers demolished. Exit 42B erased permanently, officially. But weeks later, Priya called Hale late one night. "There's something you need to see." She sent a screenshot. A navigation app glitch reported by a user in another county. Time, 2:07 a.m. Location, rural highway. Instruction displayed. Exit 13C, temporary access, active. There was no exit 13C. Blackwood Road wasn't the only buried road in the country. And Daniel Mercer hadn't worked alone. Daniel Mercer wasn't surprised when they brought him back into interrogation. He almost seemed disappointed it had taken them this long. Deputy Aaron Hale sat across from him again, a thick file resting on the metal table. "You said they were participating," Hale began calmly. "You said you were proving a point." Daniel gave a faint nod. "I was." "Then why did another fake exit appear in Benton County 3 nights after your arrest?" That made Daniel blink. Just once. Hale slid the printed screenshot across the table. Exit 13C, temporary access, active. Time, 2:07 a.m. Daniel leaned forward slowly. "That's not mine." Hale studied his face carefully. It didn't look like a lie. It looked like recognition. The replication. Priya Shah had spent the last 48 hours dissecting the Benton County incident. The digital overlay was almost identical to Exit 42B. Same formatting. Same temporary construction styling. Same 20-minute window between 2 o'clock and 2:20 a.m. But the injection point was different. Blackwood Road had relied on a buried infrastructure node Daniel personally configured in the underground operations room. Benton County's anomaly came from a remote satellite relay interference burst. Different method. Same effect. Someone had copied the blueprint. The hard drive revelation. Back at the station, digital forensics continued analyzing Daniel's recovered hard drive. Among the root simulations was something new. A folder labeled Phase 4, Distributed Model. Inside were encrypted communications. Daniel hadn't acted alone. He'd been in contact with others on a private developer forum dedicated to infrastructure security testing. The group called themselves the Cartographers. Their ideology? Modern society is built on invisible digital maps. Control the map, control movement. Expose the vulnerability before someone worse does. At least, that's what they claimed. The members. Usernames populated the thread. Atlas_89. Meridian 0. Road Ghost. Surveyor X. Each posted experiments. Most were theoretical. Simulations. White papers. But Daniel's Blackwood Road operation had been the first real-world execution. And now, someone else had activated Phase 4. The victim in Benton County. Unlike Ashford's disappearances, Benton County had a body. A college student named Rachel Kim. Her car was found crashed into a ditch near mile marker 13. No buried ramp. No underground chamber. Just trees. But her phone showed the same instruction. Exit 13C, temporary access, active. She had followed it into darkness. A vehicle struck an unmarked embankment at high speed. She died instantly. Daniel's reaction, When Hale informed Daniel about Rachel's death, something shifted in his expression. "That wasn't supposed to happen," Daniel muttered. "Supposed to?" Hale snapped. "You opened this door." Daniel shook his head. "I built a controlled environment. Safe containment. Monitored variables. You created a playbook." Daniel went quiet. Because Hale was right. The concept was simple. Exploit digital trust during low-traffic windows. Overlay a believable temporary exit. Drivers comply. But not everyone was Daniel. Not everyone wanted containment. Some wanted chaos. The pattern expands. Within 2 weeks, similar reports surfaced across 3 states. Exit 27D in rural Ohio. Exit 88A near Desert Highway in Nevada. Exit 3F outside a small Georgia town. Most were near areas where abandoned infrastructure once existed. Old ramps. Cancelled projects. Sealed bypasses. It wasn't random. Someone was researching forgotten roads and digitally resurrecting them. The mastermind? Priya tracked the forum deeper. Using Daniel's credentials, she accessed encrypted threads. One user stood out. Meridian Zero. Unlike the others, Meridian Zero never posted opinions. Only instructions. He had shared code for timed overlay injections, signal spoofing protocols, traffic camera distortion techniques, and one ominous statement weeks before Blackwood Road went live. Phase 4 requires live proof. Trust collapse must be visible. Trust collapse. That wasn't research. That was sabotage. The map hack. Investigators discovered something terrifying. The overlays weren't directly hacking navigation companies. They exploited temporary construction databases. When cities schedule roadwork, they upload short-term route adjustments to a shared infrastructure registry. That registry syncs automatically with mapping apps. Meridian Zero had found a way to insert false temporary entries during off-peak update cycles. 20 minutes. That's all it took. The race against time. Federal authorities joined the case. The Department of Transportation issued emergency audits nationwide. All temporary exit entries now required multi-factor authentication. But the problem was deeper. The vulnerability had been exposed publicly. Media outlets covered the story relentlessly. Can your GPS be trusted? Are fake roads guiding you? Public panic grew. Trust in navigation systems wavered. And accidents spiked as drivers second-guessed legitimate detours. That was Meridian Zero's true weapon. Doubt. Daniel's confession. Under mounting pressure, Daniel finally admitted something else. He had once met Meridian Zero in person. 2 years earlier. At a transportation tech conference in Chicago. Daniel described him vaguely. Mid-40s. Soft-spoken. Infrastructure consultant. Obsessed with system fragility. Daniel never knew his real name. Only that Meridian Zero believed modern civilization relied too heavily on unseen digital scaffolding. If people don't question the map, Meridian Zero had said, they surrender autonomy. Daniel thought it was philosophical. Now he realized it was operational. The hidden message. Priya found something buried inside the overlay code used in Benton County. A digital signature. Not a name. Coordinates. Latitude and longitude. They pointed to an abandoned rail yard outside Denver. Hale felt a familiar tightening in his chest. This wasn't random chaos. It was staged escalation. Denver. Federal agents raided the rail yard at dawn. Inside a converted freight car, they found a mobile signal injection rig. Satellite uplink dish. Portable servers. Temporary power supply. But no operator. Just a message displayed on a connected monitor. The map is not the territory. And beneath it, Phase 5 initiated. The realization. Back in Ashford, Hale stared at the screen in silence. Phase 5. If Phase 4 was distributed digital exits, what was Phase 5? Priya answered quietly. Blackwood Road was about trust in navigation. Phase 5 might be about trust in reality. Hale frowned. Meaning? Augmented overlays aren't limited to roads anymore. The first Phase 5 incident. It happened in Los Angeles. A temporary road closure notification appeared across multiple navigation platforms. Drivers were rerouted simultaneously off a busy freeway. But there was no closure. The congestion caused a 12-car pileup. No fatalities. But the point was clear. If you can manipulate where people believe they should go, you can control mass movement without touching a single physical sign. The final question. Daniel sat alone in his holding cell when Hale visited him one last time. "You wanted to expose vulnerability," Hale said. Daniel nodded slowly. "I wanted people to question blindly following instructions." "Well," Hale replied, "now someone's using your idea to cause real harm." Daniel looked down. The ideology had outgrown him. Exit 42B had been controlled. Phase 5 was not. As midnight approached, Hale drove once more down Blackwood Road. The ramp was gone. The asphalt crushed permanently. No sign. No distortion. But he no longer felt relief. Because the forest wasn't the threat anymore. The map was. And somewhere out there, Meridian Zero was preparing the next instruction. One that wouldn't just redirect a single car into darkness, but thousands. The problem with lies isn't that they collapse. It's that they evolve. By the time investigators reopened the case of Daniel Hargrove's disappearance, the town of Black Hollow had rewritten its own memory. People who once swore they saw nothing now remembered shadows. Those who had claimed Daniel left town suddenly weren't sure. Stories shifted like fog, but evidence doesn't shift. And buried deep in the Black Hollow Police Department archives was something that had never been fully examined. A tape. The interview room recording. It was labeled simply, Case File 88 to 217, Supplemental Interview, July 14, 1988. The interview had taken place 3 days after Daniel vanished. The subject, Sheriff Thomas Rourke. At the time, he hadn't been a suspect. He had been the lead investigator. And that was the problem. Back in 1988, no one questioned the sheriff. Especially not in Black Hollow. But in 2024, everything was different. Detective Mara Ellison sat in the dim review room, staring at the old VHS transfer on her laptop. The audio crackled when she pressed play. The screen flickered to life. Sheriff Rourke sat at a metal table in interview room B. His uniform was crisp. His badge gleamed. His hands rested calmly in front of him. Across from him sat Deputy Carl Mendez, young, nervous, asking routine procedural questions. "Sheriff," Mendez said on the tape, "just confirming your timeline the night Daniel Hargrove was reported missing." Rourke nodded. "I was home by 9:30, he said. "Wife can confirm." His voice was steady, controlled. Mara paused the video. She leaned back in her chair. That part wasn't strange. What was strange was the time. Daniel's car had been found abandoned at 9:12 p.m., which meant if Rourke was home by 9:30, he had roughly 18 minutes unaccounted for between Daniel's last known sighting and the sheriff's confirmed arrival home. 18 minutes. Not long. Unless you knew what could be done in 18 minutes. The glitch. Mara hit play again. The interview continued normally for about 6 minutes. Routine. Procedural. Then something happened. At exactly 6:42 on the timestamp, the video glitched. The image skipped. The audio crackled. And when it resumed, Rourke's posture had changed. Before the glitch, his hands had been folded calmly. After the glitch, his right hand was gripping the edge of the table. Hard. His knuckles were white. And Deputy Mendez looked different too. Tense. Rigid. Almost afraid. "You're sure no one saw you near Miller's Creek?" Mendez was asking. The audio wavered slightly, as though the tape had been recorded over something. Rourke stared at him. "I've already answered that," he said. Mara froze the frame. Miller's Creek. That location had not been publicly connected to Daniel's disappearance in 1988. The car had been found near Highway 16. Miller's Creek was 2 miles north. Remote. Overgrown. Forgotten. Except by someone who had been there. The redacted log. Mara dug deeper into the archives. It took 3 days. 3 days of dust-covered boxes and faded paperwork. And then she found it. An incident log page with a thick black redaction line across the middle. Date, July 11, 1988. Time, 10:04 p.m. Location, Miller's Creek Trailhead. Reporting officer, T. Rourke. Mara's heart pounded. The redaction covered the narrative section. She held the page up to the light. Nothing. But when she scanned it and adjusted the contrast on her computer, faint impressions of ink appeared beneath the black marker. Not fully readable. But enough. Male subject, argument overheard, physical altercation. And then one chilling fragment. Pushed. Mara leaned back slowly. No report of a fight had ever been filed publicly. No mention of Miller's Creek had been included in the official summary. And yet, the sheriff himself had logged something there. The same night Daniel disappeared. The wife who never spoke. There was one person still alive who could confirm the sheriff's timeline. Margaret Rourke. Thomas Rourke's widow. She lived in a quiet assisted living facility in neighboring Ashford. Mara drove there the next morning. Margaret was 82 now. Frail. Soft-spoken. But when Mara mentioned July 11th, 1988, something flickered in her eyes. Daniel Hargrove, Mara said gently. Do you remember that night? Margaret's fingers tightened around her teacup. Everyone remembers that night, she whispered. Your husband said he was home by 9:30. Margaret didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the window. He was late, she said finally. Mara's pulse quickened. How late? Margaret swallowed. After 11. The room seemed to tilt. Are you sure? She nodded slowly. He came home covered in dirt. Silence. He said he'd slipped near the creek. The creek. Miller's Creek. Mara felt her stomach drop. Did you believe him? She asked. Margaret's voice trembled. I wanted to. The town that protected its own. News traveled fast in Black Hollow. By the time Mara returned from Ashford, half the town knew she had spoken to Margaret Rourke. And they weren't happy. That evening, someone left a dead raccoon on her porch. No note. No message. Just a warning. She stood in the doorway staring at it. This wasn't random vandalism. This was history defending itself. Black Hollow had protected Sheriff Rourke for decades. He'd been a war veteran, a church deacon, a hero during the 1979 flood rescue. People didn't want to believe he could have killed a 17-year-old boy. But belief wasn't evidence, and evidence was stacking up. The map. Back at the station, Mara spread a large topographical map across her desk. She marked 3 locations. Daniel's abandoned car, Miller's Creek trailhead, the old logging road that connected them. The route between the car and the creek was barely visible unless you knew where to look. An old service path, overgrown, unmarked, perfect for someone who'd lived in Black Hollow his entire life. Someone like Sheriff Rourke. If Daniel had been confronted near his car, if there had been an argument, if someone pushed him. Miller's Creek wasn't just a creek. It fed into an underground cavern system. Old mining tunnels from the 1930s. Most had collapsed, but not all. And if someone had fallen, or been pushed, the water would carry everything away, or trap it forever. The phone call. At 1:17 a.m., Mara's phone rang. Private number. She answered, heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice. Low. Male. You're digging in the wrong place. Click. Dead line. Mara stared at her phone. The call had lasted exactly 7 seconds. She ran the number trace. Blocked. Untraceable. But here's what bothered her. Only 3 people knew she was planning to search Miller's Creek the next morning. Her captain, her partner, and the records clerk, which meant either the leak was inside the department, or someone was listening. The descent. At sunrise, Mara stood at the edge of Miller's Creek. The water flowed gently over moss-covered rocks. Birds chirped. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Search teams had combed the area in 1988. But technology was different now. Ground-penetrating radar, underwater drones, thermal imaging. If something was hidden here, they would find it. The first scan revealed nothing unusual near the surface. The second scan lit up like a heartbeat. 20 yards downstream, beneath a collapsed section of bank. An anomaly. Large. Irregular. Not natural. The excavation took hours. Mud. Rocks. Roots. And then, the edge of something pale emerged from the soil. A curve. Smooth. Human. Mara's breath caught. A skull. Partially exposed. Buried deep beneath 36 years of sediment. The badge. They carefully removed the remains. Male. Approximately late teens. Fracture to the occipital bone, the back of the skull. Consistent with blunt force trauma. Or a fall. Tangled in the fabric near the ribcage was something metallic. Mara crouched closer. An object glinted in the sunlight. She reached out carefully, lifted it free. Her heart stopped. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't debris. It was a badge. Sheriff's Department. Engraved on the back. T. Rourke. The world seemed to narrow to a single point. The badge had been reported lost in 1992, 4 years after Daniel disappeared. Rourke had claimed it fell off during a hunting trip. But it hadn't. It had been here, with the body, for 36 years. The realization. Back at the station, silence filled the evidence room. Mara stared at the badge sealed in its plastic bag. This wasn't circumstantial anymore. This wasn't rumor. This was proof that Sheriff Thomas Rourke had been at Miller's Creek the night Daniel Hargrove died, and that he had lost his badge in the struggle. Which meant one thing. The sheriff hadn't just investigated the disappearance. He had buried it, and the town had helped him. Whether out of loyalty, fear, or denial, they had protected a killer. But there was one more question. Why? Why Daniel? Why that night? And who made that phone call? Because someone still cared enough to threaten her. Someone still protecting the past. And if the past had teeth, it was about to bite. The dead don't speak, but sometimes. They leave behind questions loud enough to echo for decades. The notebook. Daniel Hargrove's remains confirmed what the town of Black Hollow had tried to bury. He never ran away. He never left. He died the night he disappeared. The skull fracture told part of the story. The sheriff's badge told the rest. But motive, that was still missing. And motive changes everything. 3 days after the remains were recovered from Miller's Creek, Mara received a call from an unexpected source. Evelyn Carter, Daniel's childhood friend, now living 2 states away. I saw the news, Evelyn said. About the creek. Her voice trembled. There's something you should know. Mara drove 6 hours that same afternoon. Evelyn met her at a quiet diner off Route 9. She looked exhausted, like someone who had been carrying a weight for 36 years. I kept it, Evelyn said softly, sliding a plastic storage container across the table. Inside was a spiral-bound notebook. Worn. Water-stained. The cover read, D.H. July. Mara's pulse quickened. Daniel gave this to me the day before he disappeared, Evelyn whispered. He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to someone who would believe him. Why didn't you? Mara asked gently. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Because the sheriff told my parents Daniel ran away, and he said spreading rumors would only hurt the town. Rumors. Mara opened the notebook. It wasn't a diary. It was documentation. Dates, times, license plate numbers, and one repeated phrase circled in red ink. Logging trucks, after midnight. The mining tunnels. The old Black Hollow mining system had officially closed in 1941. At least, that's what the town records said. But Daniel's notebook suggested otherwise. He had sketched crude maps of the tunnel entrances near Miller's Creek. One page read, July 3rd, saw truck go past trailhead at 12:47 a.m. No company markings. Another entry, July 7th, sheriff at the clearing, arguing with man in suit. Suit gave him envelope. Mara felt her chest tighten. An envelope. Money. Threats. Orders. Then the final entry. Dated July 11th. The night Daniel disappeared. Confronted R at Creek. Told him I had photos. He said I didn't understand how things work here. No further entries. The page ended mid-sentence. The photos. Photos. Mara asked. Evelyn nodded slowly. He had a camera. One of those old 35mm ones. Do you know where it is? Evelyn hesitated. He hid it in the old treehouse behind his parents' property. The treehouse had long since collapsed, but the property still stood, and 2 days later, Mara stood beneath what remained of warped wooden boards tangled in vines. Crime scene technicians carefully sifted through debris. It took 3 hours. Then, detective. A small metal box was pulled from beneath the rotted floorboards. Inside was a camera, and a roll of undeveloped film. Preserved by luck, or fate. The development. Modern labs can work miracles, even on decades-old film. When the first image appeared on the screen, the room went silent. It showed a truck packed near Miller's Creek. No company logo, just mud-caked tires and a partially visible license plate. The second photo was worse. Sheriff Thomas Rourke, standing beside the truck, speaking to a man in a dark suit. The man's face was turned slightly, but recognizable enough. Mara zoomed in. She knew that face, even 36 years younger. Councilman Richard Halberd, now mayor of Black Hollow. The cover-up. Mayor Halberd had built his entire career on revitalizing Black Hollow. He brought in new businesses, improved infrastructure, funded community projects. He was the golden child of the town. And according to Daniel's photos, he had been at Miller's Creek the night before Daniel died. Mara requested financial records from the late 1980s, specifically tied to land development and mining permits. What she found was disturbing. In 1987, a shell company purchased mineral rights to the abandoned tunnels. The company name, Creekside Resource Holdings. Registered owner, Richard Halberd. The mining operation had never been publicly announced, which meant it was illegal, unregulated, and likely dangerous. The tunnels were unstable. If someone had been using them for secret extraction, and a teenager had discovered it, silence would be necessary. Permanent silence. The confrontation. Mara didn't wait for a warrant. She went straight to Mayor Halberd's office. He greeted her with a practiced smile. Detective Ellison, I was just about to call and offer condolences to Daniel's family. You knew him, Mara said flatly. Everyone knew Daniel. Mara placed the photograph on his desk. His smile faltered. Just for a second. Then it returned. That could be anyone. It's you, Mara said. July 10th, 1988. Miller's Creek. Halberd leaned back. That was decades ago. You were operating an illegal mining operation. Silence. That's a serious accusation. And Daniel found out. Halberd's eyes hardened. You're chasing ghosts. No, Mara said quietly. I'm chasing truth. She stood. One more thing. Sheriff Rourke's badge was found with Daniel's body. That got him. The color drained from Halberd's face. But only briefly. Then he recovered. If you're implying what I think you are, he said calmly, be very careful. A threat. Not subtle. Not necessary. Because Mara already knew. This wasn't just about one corrupt sheriff. It was about power, money, and a town willing to protect both. The autopsy report. The forensic analysis of Daniel's remains delivered a final piece of the puzzle. The skull fracture was consistent with a fall, but not an accidental one. There were defensive wounds on his forearms, and bruising along the jawline. He had been struck first, then pushed. The impact point matched the rocky embankment near the tunnel entrance, not the open creek, which meant Daniel likely fell backward during a struggle. His body then rolled into the water, carried downstream, buried by time. Sheriff Rourke hadn't planned to kill him, but he had intended to silence him. And once it happened, Halberd had stepped in, not to report it, but to bury it. Literally. The second voice. That night, Mara listened again to the old interview tape, this time with enhanced audio software. At the moment of the glitch, beneath the static, there was another voice. Faint, but audible. This can't get out. It wasn't Deputy Mendez. It wasn't Rourke. It was deeper, calmer, controlled. Mara compared it to archived speeches, public addresses, town hall meetings. Mayor Richard Halberd. It was him. He had been in that room, off camera, listening, making sure the story stayed straight. The pattern. Mara began reviewing other unsolved incidents from the late 80s. 2 environmental complaints, 1 missing drifter, and a collapsed tunnel accident that killed 3 undocumented workers, all connected to Creekside Resource Holdings, all quietly resolved, all signed off by Sheriff Rourke. This wasn't a single cover-up, it was a system, and Daniel Hargrove had stumbled into it. The breaking point. Mara submitted a request for a grand jury investigation. It would take weeks, maybe months, but once initiated, it couldn't be quietly erased. That evening, she returned home. The porch light was broken. Her front door was slightly ajar. She drew her weapon, entered slowly. The house was empty, but on her kitchen table sat something that made her blood run cold. Daniel's notebook. The original. Not the copy from Evelyn. The real one. And scrawled across the last page in fresh ink were 3 words. Stop digging. Now. Mara stood frozen. Only 3 people had known she recovered that notebook, which meant the leak wasn't historical. It was current. And close. Very close. Trust is fragile. In a small town, it's currency. In a police department, it's survival. And in Black Hollow, it was about to shatter. The duplicate. Mara didn't touch the notebook at first. She stood in her kitchen, staring at it like it might explode. The copy Evelyn had given her was still locked in evidence. This was Daniel's original, which meant someone had accessed old, sealed property from 1988, or someone had taken it decades ago and kept it. Either way, someone had been watching her. She photographed everything before sealing it in an evidence bag. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. Which meant one thing. Whoever entered her home either had a key, or knew how to bypass the alarm system. Very few people had access to her security codes. Her captain, her partner, and internal IT. Her stomach tightened. Deputy Aaron Cole. Deputy Aaron Cole had been her partner for 6 years. Reliable, methodical, quiet. He had grown up in Black Hollow. His father had been a volunteer firefighter during the 1979 flood rescue, alongside Sheriff Rourke. Cole knew every family in town, every back road, every rumor. Mara watched him carefully the next morning. He avoided eye contact. Subtle, but noticeable. "You sleep okay?" she asked casually. He shrugged. "As well as anyone can around here lately." "Funny," she said. "Someone broke into my house last night." His pen stopped moving for half a second, then continued. "Anything taken?" "No," she replied. "Something was returned." That got his attention. "Returned?" She nodded. Daniel Hargrove's original notebook. Silence stretched between them. Cole leaned back in his chair. "That's not possible," he said. "That's what I thought." His jaw tightened. "You think someone inside the department is involved?" Mara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched his reaction. He didn't look shocked. He looked worried. The access log. Every evidence locker entry is recorded digitally now. But in 1988, it was paper-based. Boxes were later archived and digitized. Mara requested the full access log history for Daniel's evidence file. There were only 2 recent entries. Hers, and one from 3 months ago, authorized by Deputy Aaron Cole. Her pulse quickened. She walked straight to his desk. "You accessed Daniel's evidence in November," she said. He didn't deny it. "I was cleaning up old files." "You didn't log a reason." He met her eyes. "Because there wasn't one that would make sense to you." That wasn't an answer. "That notebook ended up on my kitchen table," she said quietly. "Do you want to explain that?" Cole stood slowly. "I didn't break into your house. But you accessed the evidence." "Yes." "Why?" He hesitated, and that hesitation told her everything. The truth about his father. Cole closed his office door, lowered his voice. "My father worked security for Creekside Resource Holdings in the late 80s. Mara felt the air leave her lungs. "He said it was temporary," Cole continued. "Extra income. But after Daniel disappeared, things changed." "How?" "My father started drinking. A lot. He'd wake up screaming some nights." "What did he say?" Cole swallowed. "He said he saw something he shouldn't have." Mara's mind raced. "A fight?" He nodded. "At the creek. Between Sheriff Rourke and a kid. Daniel. My father said Rourke shoved him," Cole whispered. "Said he didn't mean for it to happen." Mara's heart pounded. "Why didn't your father report it?" Cole laughed bitterly. "Report it? To who?" "Rourke ran the town. And Halbert owned half of it." That part, she already knew. "But why access the evidence now?" she pressed. "Because my father died in October," Cole said quietly. "And before he died, he told me where to look." The hidden statement. Cole pulled a folded, yellowed document from his jacket pocket. "I found this in his toolbox." It was a handwritten statement. Unsigned, undated, but unmistakable. It described the night of July 11th, 1988. The illegal mining operation. Daniel confronting Rourke. Halbert arriving in a truck. An argument escalating. And then, a shove. The boy slipped. Hit his head. Mara read it twice. Your father witnessed it. Cole nodded. He was posted near the tunnel entrance. He heard shouting. By the time he reached them, Daniel was already on the ground. And Halberd? He told my father to keep quiet. Said accidents happen. Said the town's future depended on silence. Mara exhaled slowly. This wasn't just corruption. It was conspiracy. The real reason. You still haven't answered my question, she said. Why bring the notebook to my house? Cole looked genuinely confused. I didn't. She studied him carefully. No shift in breathing. No defensive posture. Just confusion. Which meant there was someone else. Someone with access. Someone close enough to know both her case progress and Cole's connection. Her captain. Captain Howard Briggs. Captain Briggs had served under Sheriff Rourke in the late 80s. Back then, he'd been a junior officer. Now, he was head of the department. Respected. Decorated. Untouchable. Mara walked into his office without knocking. We need to talk. He looked up calmly. I assume this is about the mayor. It's about you. That made him pause. She placed the access log on his desk. And this. Then Daniel's original notebook. He stared at it. Longer than necessary. I haven't seen that in years, he said softly. Years. Not decades. Years. You knew where it was, she said. He leaned back in his chair. Detective, you're getting too close to something that will tear this town apart. It deserves to be torn apart. You think you're the first person to try? He asked quietly. Silence. You were there that night, she said. Briggs didn't deny it. I was young, he said. I believed in Rourke. In Halberd. They said the mining operation would save Black Hollow. And killing a teenager was part of that plan. His voice hardened. No one planned that. But you covered it up. He looked at her steadily. We protected the town. No, she replied coldly. You protected yourselves. The meeting. Briggs finally spoke the truth. After Daniel fell, Rourke panicked. Halberd arrived within minutes. They argued about what to do. Briggs suggested calling it in, reporting it as an accident. Halberd refused. The mining operation was illegal. If exposed, it would bankrupt half the town. So they moved the body. Planned to stage the car near Highway 16. Make it look like Daniel ran away. But during transport, the body slipped into the creek's current. They couldn't retrieve it. So they adapted the story. Teen runaway. Case closed. And you lived with that? Mara asked. Briggs looked tired. Every day. The arrest that changed everything. Mara stepped back. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and conspiracy. Briggs didn't resist. As she cuffed him, he said something that chilled her. You think this ends with me? She froze. What does that mean? He smiled faintly. You're forgetting someone. The call from City Hall. Before she could process his words, her phone rang. Mayor Halberd. She answered. You've made a mistake, he said calmly. No, she replied. You did. 36 years ago. There was a long pause. Then he said something unexpected. I didn't push him. The words hung in the air. Rourke did, he continued. But I didn't stop it. That wasn't innocence. That was confession by omission. You'll get your warrant, she said. You already have enough. Silence. Then a final sentence. You should check the tunnels. Click. The real secret. That night, search teams entered the old mining tunnels for the first time in decades. What they found wasn't just evidence of illegal extraction. It was worse. Hidden in a collapsed chamber were barrels. Dozens of them. Industrial waste. Toxic. Unreported. Leaking into the groundwater for 36 years. Daniel hadn't just discovered illegal mining. He had discovered environmental poisoning. And if that had become public in 1988, Black Hollow wouldn't have survived it. So they buried the truth. Along with him. But Captain Briggs was right about one thing. This didn't end with him. Because someone had still broken into Mara's house. And someone still believed the truth should stay buried. And that someone hadn't shown their hand yet. Sometimes the final witness isn't the one who saw everything. Sometimes, it's the one who survived it. The leak. The discovery of the toxic barrels inside the abandoned mining tunnels exploded across state news within 48 hours. Environmental agencies descended on Black Hollow. Hazmat teams sealed off Miller's Creek. News vans lined Main Street. For the first time in decades, the town wasn't controlling the narrative. It was drowning in it. Mayor Richard Halberd publicly denied knowledge of the toxic dumping. Captain Howard Briggs sat in county jail awaiting arraignment. Deputy Aaron Cole remained at Mara's side, quiet, steady, but visibly shaken by the truth about his father. But one question remained unanswered. Who broke into Mara's house? Who returned Daniel's original notebook? And who made the 1:17 a.m. phone call warning her to stop digging? That person wasn't Halberd, and it wasn't Briggs, because both had been under quiet surveillance when the break-in occurred, which meant there was a third player, someone who had stayed invisible for 36 years. The tunnel map. While environmental crews assessed contamination levels, Mara reviewed the full structural map of the Black Hollow mining system. Most of it had collapsed long ago, but one section, deep beyond the collapsed chamber where the barrels were found, showed a secondary shaft that had never been officially sealed. The diagram was incomplete, almost deliberately vague. She traced the line with her finger. This wasn't part of the original mining blueprint, she muttered. Cole leaned over her shoulder. What are you thinking? I think there's more down there. The sound. 2 nights later, a motion sensor installed near the tunnel entrance triggered at 2:43 a.m. Security footage showed something unexpected. A flashlight beam. Moving inside the restricted area. Someone was still accessing the tunnels. Mara didn't wait for backup clearance. She and Cole drove straight to Miller's Creek. The air was colder near the entrance. Thick. Heavy. They stepped inside wearing respirators and protective suits. Their flashlights cut through dust and darkness. And then, they heard it. A metallic clang, echoing from deeper within. Not the sound of shifting debris. The sound of movement. Human movement. The hidden chamber. They followed the noise down the unmarked shaft. The passage narrowed. Ceiling beams creaked above them. Then the tunnel opened into a hidden chamber. And there was a cot, a lantern, canned food stacked neatly against the wall, and a radio scanner. Someone had been living down here. Recently. Footsteps echoed behind them. Mara spun, weapon raised. A man stepped from the shadows. Thin, bearded, eyes sharp despite years of isolation. Don't shoot, he said calmly. Cole froze. Recognition flickered across his face. Tommy. The man exhaled slowly. Hey, Aaron. Mara lowered her weapon slightly. Who is this? Cole swallowed. Thomas Mendez. The name hit her instantly. Deputy Carl Mendez. The young officer who interviewed Sheriff Rock in 1988. The one in the tape. Thomas Mendez was his son. Reported missing in 2004. Presumed dead after a hiking accident near Miller's Creek. Except, he wasn't dead. He had never left. The son who listened. My father told me everything before he died, Tommy said quietly. Mara's heart pounded. Everything about that interview. He nodded. He wasn't supposed to ask about Miller's Creek. Sheriff Rock told him to stick to the script. But he didn't, Mara said. Tommy gave a faint smile. He always said if you're going to wear a badge, wear it clean. The glitch in the tape. The tension. The fear. What happened after the interview? Mara asked. Tommy's jaw tightened. Halberd came into the room. Off camera. Told my father he was asking dangerous questions. And my father refused to rewrite the report. Mara already knew the answer before he said it. 3 months later, he died in a car accident. Cole's breath caught. That accident was ruled mechanical failure, he said. Tommy nodded slowly. The brakes were cut. Silence filled the chamber. Why he stayed? Why fake your own death? Mara asked. Tommy's eyes darkened. Because when I started asking questions about my father's accident, someone started following me. Halberd. Or Briggs. Or both. So you disappeared, she said. I knew the tunnels better than anyone. My dad used to patrol them during the mining operation. And you've been down here for 20 years. Cole asked, stunned. Not always. I move around. Stay off radar. But I kept listening. He gestured to the radio scanner. I heard when you reopened the case. And the call? Mara asked quietly. Tommy met her eyes. That was me. Her pulse spiked. "You told me to stop digging. I needed to know if you were serious," he said. "If you'd back down." And when I didn't, he looked at the ground. I returned the notebook. Mara felt the anger rise. "You broke into my house. I needed to see how far this had spread. I needed leverage." "Leverage against who?" Cole demanded. Tommy's gaze hardened. "Against Halberd. The real secret meeting." Tommy stepped deeper into the chamber. "There's something you haven't found yet." He led them toward a rusted filing cabinet tucked against the far wall. Inside were documents, old permits, shipping logs, payment records, and one audio cassette. Tommy held it carefully. "My father recorded the rest of the interview." Mara's breath caught. "The part after the glitch." He nodded. "They forced him to stop the official recording. But he kept a backup in his pocket. Back at the station, they digitized the tape. The audio was raw, unfiltered. Halberd's voice was unmistakable. "You understand what's at stake, Cal," Halberd said on the tape. "If this becomes public, the town collapses." Sheriff Rourke's voice followed. "It was an accident." Then Mendez's voice. "An accident you're covering up." Silence. And then, a single sentence that changed everything. "Halberd, if you can't protect this town, we'll find someone who will." The threat wasn't subtle. 3 months later, Mendez was dead. The final witness. Tommy wasn't just a survivor. He was a witness. He had seen Halberd near the creek the night Daniel died. From a distance. But enough to confirm his presence. He had stayed hidden because he believed no one would ever challenge the town's power structure. Until now. "You're going to testify?" Mara asked. He hesitated. "They'll come after me." "They already did," Cole said quietly. Tommy looked at him for a long moment. Then nodded. "Yes." The arrest warrant. With the tape, the financial records, the toxic dumping evidence, and now Tommy's testimony. Mara had what she needed. A judge signed the warrant at 4:12 p.m. Mayor Richard Halberd was arrested on charges of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, environmental crimes, and accessory to manslaughter. As deputies escorted him from City Hall, cameras flashed. For the first time in decades, the untouchable man looked small. But as he passed Mara, he leaned close enough to whisper, "You think this cleans the water?" She didn't answer, because she already knew. The groundwater contamination had spread beyond Black Hollow. Children had grown up drinking it. Families had gotten sick, and no one had ever connected it to the tunnels. Until Daniel tried to. The fallout. The town fractured. Some called Mara a hero. Others called her a traitor. But truth doesn't care about popularity. Environmental testing began county-wide. Civil lawsuits were filed. Old records reopened. And in the middle of it all, Daniel Hargrove finally received a proper memorial service. His parents stood beside his grave as the truth was spoken aloud. Not runaway. Not drifter. Not forgotten. Victim. But even with Halberd in custody, even with Briggs jailed, one question lingered. Sheriff Rourke had claimed it was an accident, a shove during an argument. But what had Daniel actually said that night? What had pushed Rourke over the edge? Because according to Tommy, Daniel wasn't just threatening to expose illegal mining. He had something else. Something bigger. And whatever it was, it had terrified them. Power will protect money. Money will protect reputation. But there is one thing both fear more than anything else. Proof. And Daniel Hargrove had found it. The missing roll. When the lab finished developing the camera found in Daniel's treehouse, there was something strange. 36 exposures. Only 28 developed. 8 frames were blank. Not overexposed. Not damaged. Simply missing. Mara stared at the digital contact sheet. "Where are the rest?" she asked the technician. He shrugged. Either they were removed before development, or the roll was swapped. Swapped. Which meant Daniel had taken more photos than the ones recovered. And someone knew exactly which ones to remove. She pulled Daniel's notebook from evidence and flipped to the final completed entry before July 11th. July 9 to 1:13 a.m. Got inside storage chamber. Barrels marked HZ-17. But that's not the worst of it. Not the worst of it. The sentence ended there. No elaboration. No explanation. Just that chilling fragment. HZ-17. Mara contacted the state environmental agency. "Do you have any record of a compound labeled HZ17? She asked. There was a long pause on the other end. "That designation hasn't been used since the late 80s, the analyst said carefully. "What was it?" Another pause. "Experimental industrial solvent. Extremely unstable. Highly carcinogenic." Mara's stomach dropped. Why was it discontinued? Because it contaminated groundwater in 2 separate states before being quietly pulled from use. Quietly. She closed her eyes. How toxic? In concentrated exposure? Fatal. The barrels in the tunnels weren't just illegal waste. They were banned chemical solvent. And if Daniel had photographed labels confirming that, it would have implicated not only Halberd, but the supplier, a much larger entity. The supplier. Shipping manifests recovered from the hidden filing cabinet in the tunnel chamber listed a distributor, Armitage Industrial Solutions, headquartered out of state, still operational today. Mara dug into corporate history. In 1988, Armitage had been facing multiple environmental investigations. Settlements had been reached, fines paid, no criminal convictions, and Creekside Resource Holdings had been one of their smallest clients. Almost invisible. Which made sense. If you wanted to offload toxic solvent quietly, you'd find a remote town, an abandoned mine, and a local official willing to look the other way. Or 3. The real argument. Tommy Mendez met Mara at the station that evening. "There's something else my father told me," he said. She looked up. He said Daniel wasn't just threatening to go to the newspaper. What was he threatening? Tommy swallowed. He said Daniel had already mailed something. Mara's pulse quickened. Mailed what? Photos. And a letter. To who? My father didn't know. But he said Rourke panicked when Daniel mentioned it. That changed everything. If Daniel had mailed evidence before confronting Rourke, then somewhere out there, proof still existed. Or had existed. She reopened Daniel's notebook. Flipped to the inside cover. There was a faint indentation beneath the paper, like something had once been taped there. She angled it under forensic light. An address imprint appeared. Partial, but legible enough. Gazette, attention, investigations desk. The Black Hollow Gazette. The town newspaper. The archive room. The Gazette had changed ownership twice since 1988. Its archives were now stored in a basement room beneath the printing office. Dust coated everything. Boxes labeled by year lined the walls. Mara requested all incoming mail logs from July 1988. Most small-town papers logged submissions manually back then. After 2 hours of searching, she found it. July 10th, 1988. Envelope received. No return address. Marked confidential, environmental. Initialed by editor, Samuel Klein. Samuel Klein had died in 1996. Heart attack. But there was no record of the envelope's contents. No article. No follow-up. Nothing published. Which meant one of 2 things. Klein dismissed it. Or someone ensured he did. The editor's widow. Samuel Klein's widow still lived in Black Hollow. Eleanor Klein opened the door cautiously. When Mara explained why she was there, Eleanor went pale. Sam talked about that letter, she whispered. Mara's heart pounded. He said it was serious. Said it could shut down half the county. What happened to it? Eleanor hesitated. The sheriff came by the next day. Rourke. He said the letter was a prank. Told Sam not to stir panic. And? Eleanor looked away. Sam was scared. He said if the sheriff wanted it buried, there was more to it than he understood. Did he keep a copy? Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. In the attic. The envelope. The envelope was yellowed with age. Still sealed. Eleanor had never opened it. Sam had hidden it. Perhaps intending to revisit it. Perhaps fearing it. Mara carefully opened the brittle paper. Inside were 3 photographs. And a handwritten letter. The photos were the missing 8 frames. Clear. Undeniable. Barrels marked HZ17 stacked deep inside the tunnel. A shipment manifest with Armitage Industrial Solutions logo visible. And the final image. Mayor Richard Halberd's signature approving delivery receipt. Illegible to most. Damning to investigators. Mara unfolded the letter. Daniel's handwriting was rushed but clear. If you're reading this, I might already be in trouble. They are dumping something poisonous in the old mine. I heard them say it could make people sick. The sheriff knows. The councilman knows. Please don't let them hide this. The date was July 10th, one day before he died. The bigger fear. Daniel hadn't just discovered illegal mining. He discovered corporate dumping of banned chemical solvent. If exposed in 1988, Armitage Industrial Solutions would have faced federal criminal charges. Halberd would have been ruined. Rourke disgraced. The town financially crippled. So when Daniel confronted Rourke at Miller's Creek, he wasn't bluffing. He had proof. And Rourke knew it. That's why the argument escalated. That's why the shove happened. Not just to silence a kid, but to silence a scandal that reached far beyond Black Hollow. The federal angle. Mara contacted the state attorney general's office. Within days, federal investigators stepped in. Environmental Protection Agency officials reopened old Armitage cases. Suddenly, this wasn't just a local cover-up. It was interstate environmental crime. Halberd's charges expanded. Corporate subpoenas followed. And Armitage Industrial Solutions issued a public statement denying knowledge of illegal dumping in Black Hollow. But the signed manifest photo made denial impossible. The weight of truth. That night, Mara stood at Miller's Creek alone. The water flowed over the same rocks where Daniel had fallen. She imagined him there, 17 years old. Scared, but brave enough to fight. Brave enough to mail the evidence. Brave enough to confront authority. And in the end, brave enough to threaten men who had built their power on silence. The toxic barrels would take years to fully clean. The groundwater damage couldn't be undone overnight. But the truth was finally moving. And it was louder than it had ever been. But one final question lingered. If Daniel mailed the envelope on July 10, and confronted Rourke on July 11, how did Rourke know so quickly? Who told him about the letter? Because someone at the Gazette had tipped him off. Which meant, even now, the web extended further than they realized, and the final piece of betrayal was still waiting to be exposed. Every conspiracy has a weak link. Not the loudest voice, not the most powerful name, but the one person who thought they were doing something small, when in reality, they sealed someone's fate. Daniel mailed the envelope on July 10th. He confronted Sheriff Rourke on July 11th, which meant Rourke had less than 24 hours to react. Unless someone warned him immediately. And that someone worked at the Black Hollow Gazette. The assistant no one remembered. Samuel Klein had been editor in 1988. But he wasn't alone. Old staff rosters revealed one other name in the newsroom that summer. Linda Mercer, assistant editor, age 24 at the time. She had left Black Hollow in 1989. No scandal. No explanation. Just gone. Mara tracked her down to a quiet suburb outside Dayton. She now went by her married name, Linda Mercer Whitfield. When Mara introduced herself and mentioned Daniel Hargrove, Linda's composure cracked instantly. "I've been waiting for this," she whispered. The confession. They sat at Linda's kitchen table. No recorder at first. Just silence and 36 years of guilt pressing down between them. "I opened the envelope," Linda said quietly. "Not Sam." She shook her head. It was addressed to investigations. Sam was at lunch. "I thought it might be something important." It was. "The photos scared me," she continued. "Barrels in the mine. Chemical labels. The sheriff's name mentioned in the letter." "What did you do?" Linda's hands trembled. "I called him." Mara felt the confirmation hit like a weight. "You called Sheriff Rourke?" "Yes." "Why?" "I thought he needed to know someone was accusing him. Accusing him of poisoning the town." Mara asked sharply. Linda flinched. "He was the sheriff. We trusted him." Trust. The same currency that had protected corruption for decades. "What did he say?" Mara asked. "He came down to the office within an hour." The visit. According to Linda, Rourke didn't come alone. Mayor Halberd arrived 15 minutes later. They met privately with Samuel Klein in his office. The door was closed. Voices were raised. Then silence. When the door opened, Rourke held the envelope. Halberd had his hand on Sam's shoulder. "They said it was fabricated," Linda whispered. "Said it was a prank by a troubled kid." And Sam believed them. Linda's eyes filled with tears. "No. But he was afraid. Of what? Of losing everything. The Gazette was financially struggling in 1988. Halberd had significant advertising influence through town businesses. Pull that funding, and the paper would collapse. So Sam buried the story. He hid the envelope in his attic, and Daniel confronted Rourke the next day, not knowing the sheriff already knew. The unintended catalyst. You didn't know what would happen, Mara said quietly. Linda nodded, crying now. I thought I was protecting the paper, protecting the town from panic. Instead, she had handed Daniel's warning directly to the man he was trying to expose. Which meant when Daniel walked down to Miller's Creek that night, Rourke wasn't surprised. He was waiting. The timeline reconstructed. With Linda's statement, the final 48 hours of Daniel Hargrove's life became painfully clear. July 10th, afternoon. Daniel mails the envelope to the Gazette. July 10th, early evening. Linda opens it, calls Sheriff Rourke. July 10th, night. Rourke and Halberd retrieve the envelope. July 11th, evening. Daniel confronts Rourke at Miller's Creek. But here's the part that had never been fully understood. Rourke didn't go to the creek alone. The third man, Tommy Mendez, had seen Rourke and Halberd that night, but he hadn't been close enough to hear everything. Now, with Linda's testimony, Mara revisited Tommy's account. You said your father mentioned someone else near the creek, Mara pressed. Tommy hesitated. He thought he heard another voice during the argument. Did he recognize it? Tommy nodded slowly. Captain Briggs. Which meant Briggs hadn't just helped cover up the aftermath. He had been there, at the confrontation. 3 men, 1 teenager, an argument already fueled by panic. What really happened? Briggs finally broke during his second interrogation. He admitted being called to the creek by Rourke that night. Tom said the kid had something, Briggs said quietly. Said he was threatening to ruin everything. Why didn't you stop it? Mara demanded. Briggs closed his eyes. Because I thought it would calm down. But it didn't. According to Briggs, Daniel was furious. He accused them of poisoning the water, of covering it up, of choosing money over lives. And then he said something that made Halberd lose control. He said he'd already mailed the evidence, Briggs whispered. Halberd denied it, called him a liar. Daniel insisted. The argument escalated. Rourke grabbed him. Daniel shoved back. And then, Rourke pushed him. Not a calculated move. Not a planned murder. A panicked reaction. Daniel stumbled backward. Hit the embankment. The crack of skull against rock echoed through the trees. Silence followed. The kind of silence that changes lives. The choice. For a moment, Briggs said, no one moved. Daniel lay motionless. Blood pooled beneath his head. Halberd knelt beside him. Checked for a pulse. There was one, Briggs admitted quietly. Mara froze. What? He was still breathing. The room felt suddenly too small. You said he died instantly. Briggs shook his head. No. Then why didn't you call for help? His voice broke. Halberd said if we called it in, it was over. The mine. The town. Everything. So you let him die? Briggs didn't answer. He didn't have to. They had left him there for several minutes. Arguing. Panicking. Debating. By the time they returned to check, Daniel was gone. Whether from blood loss, or drowning as his body slipped into the creek. They never knew. And they never tried to find out. The final arrest. Briggs' new confession changed the charges. Accessory became manslaughter. Negligent homicide. Failure to render aid. Halberd's charges escalated as well. What had once been spun as an accident was now legally defined as something else. A preventable death. Because they chose silence over saving a life. The town reacts. Black Hollow fractured beyond repair. Some demanded harsher punishment. Others insisted the men had protected economic survival. But when state health officials released preliminary findings, elevated cancer rates in residents who grew up drinking groundwater near Miller's Creek, the argument ended. Daniel hadn't just tried to expose corruption. He tried to stop harm that lasted decades. And he paid with his life. The last piece. Linda Mercer's testimony closed the final loop. The warning. The tip-off. The fatal confrontation. But one question still lingered in Mara's mind. Why didn't Samuel Klein ever reopen the story? He kept the envelope. He hid it. He knew it mattered. Yet he stayed silent until his death. Eleanor Klein had mentioned something earlier. Sam said the truth would come out eventually, she had whispered. Why had he believed that? What had he done behind the scenes? Because editors don't just hide evidence. Sometimes, they duplicate it. Secrets rot. They fester beneath the surface, poisoning everything around them. But sometimes, the truth survives long enough to rise. And when it does, it doesn't whisper, it detonates. The safe deposit box. Eleanor Klein remembered something 3 days after Mara's last visit. A key. Small. Brass. Hidden inside Samuel Klein's old desk drawer. I never knew what it opened, Eleanor said quietly. He told me if anything ever happened to him, to give it to someone who wouldn't be afraid. Mara turned the key over in her palm. Stamped along its edge. First County Bank, Box 317. They went together. Eleanor, trembling but resolute. Mara, steady but bracing for impact. The bank manager retrieved the box from the vault. Decades untouched. The lid creaked open. Inside was a single manila folder, labeled in Samuel Klein's handwriting. In case the truth is needed. The duplicate evidence. Samuel Klein hadn't just hidden Daniel's envelope. He had copied everything. Photographs, the letter, and something else Mara hadn't seen before. A typed memorandum dated July 12, 1988. Addressed to Office of the State Attorney General. But it was never mailed. Attached was a draft investigative article titled, Poison Beneath Black Hollow. The article detailed illegal mining in abandoned tunnels, an unauthorized dumping of HZ-17 solvent, a signatures tied to Richard Halberd, a Sheriff Rourke's involvement, and at the bottom, a handwritten note from Sam. If this is suppressed, someone is in danger. Mara felt a cold wave wash over her. He knew Daniel could be hurt. And he still buried it, not because he didn't believe it, but because he was afraid. Afraid of losing the paper, afraid of losing the town, afraid of losing everything. The insurance policy. Tucked behind the article draft was one final page. A carbon copy of a letter addressed to a larger newspaper in the state capital. The envelope had been postmarked July 13, 1988, 2 days after Daniel died, which meant Sam had mailed something after all. But what? Mara contacted the State Papers Archives Department. After 2 days of searching, they found it. An envelope from Black Hollow, marked confidential, filed under unverified claims. Inside were copies of Daniel's photos and Sam's summary notes. But the paper never ran it. Why? Because 3 days after they received it, they got a phone call from a lawyer representing Armitage Industrial Solutions, threatening legal action for defamation. Without a body, without official confirmation. The story died in the editor's inbox, buried not by a sheriff, not by a mayor, but by fear of corporate power. The trial. The courtroom was packed when proceedings began. Richard Halberd sat rigid at the defense table. Captain Howard Briggs looked smaller than ever. Charges included a manslaughter, a conspiracy to obstruct justice, our environmental crimes, a failure to render aid. Tommy Mendez testified, his voice steady. His father's tape played in open court. Linda Mercer testified, admitting her call to Rourke. Even Eleanor Klein took the stand, holding Daniel's letter in trembling hands. And finally, Mara testified, laying out the timeline, the photographs, the solvent, the toxic barrels still being removed from the tunnels. The defense tried to argue accident, tried to argue panic, tried to argue economic preservation. But one question cut through every excuse. Why didn't you call for help when Daniel was still breathing? There was no answer good enough. The verdict. After 6 days of deliberation. Guilty. On all major counts. Halberd received a lengthy prison sentence. Briggs as well. Civil suits against Armitage Industrial Solutions moved forward federally. The company eventually reached a multi-million-dollar settlement to fund environmental cleanup and medical monitoring for Black Hollow residents. It didn't undo the damage, but it acknowledged it. And for the first time, the truth was official. Not rumor, not conspiracy. Fact. The water. Cleanup crews worked for years at Miller's Creek. Contaminated soil was removed. Groundwater filtration systems installed. Health screenings offered to residents free of charge. Cancer clusters once dismissed as coincidence were finally studied seriously. Daniel's name became attached to the Environmental Reform Initiative. The Daniel Hargrove Clean Water Act passed at the state level, strengthening oversight on abandoned industrial sites. His parents attended the signing ceremony. Older, grayer, but finally heard. The memorial. A stone marker now stands near Miller's Creek. Not at the exact place he fell, but close enough to hear the water. It reads, Daniel Hargrove, 1971 to 1988. He told the truth. Every year, on July 11th, residents gather there. Some bring flowers. Some bring apologies. Some bring silence. The final conversation. Months after the trial ended, Mara received a letter. No return address. Just a single line written inside. You finished what he started. It was signed. TM. Tommy Mendez disappeared again after testifying. Not out of fear, but because he said Black Hollow wasn't his home anymore. Maybe it never had been. The echo. On a quiet evening, Mara returned to the creek one last time. The water ran clearer now. Not perfect, but healing. She stood there thinking about how close the truth had come to disappearing forever. If Daniel hadn't mailed the envelope. If Sam hadn't copied it. If Tommy hadn't hidden in the tunnels. If Linda hadn't confessed. If she hadn't kept digging. Truth is fragile. It depends on people willing to risk comfort. Risk reputation. Risk safety. Daniel was 17. He could have ignored what he saw. Could have walked away. But he didn't. And because he didn't, a town was forced to look at itself. The real ending. Some people still say it was an accident. Some still defend Halberd. Small towns protect their own. But facts don't bend to loyalty. Daniel wasn't a runaway. He wasn't a rebel. He wasn't a troublemaker. He was a witness. And he was right. The mine was poisoning the town. The leaders were covering it up. And silence was killing more than just him. 36 years later, his voice finally reached the surface. Not from a scream. Not from a rumor. But from proof. And proof outlived them all. Story 2. The first time the house spoke, no one believed her. But the second time, she had proof. Lena Whitmore bought the house because it was cheap. Too cheap. A 2-story suburban home on a quiet street. Fresh paint. New floors. Stainless steel appliances. The listing described it as recently renovated. Move-in ready. Motivated seller. There was no mention of why the seller was so motivated. Lena found out the first night. Night 1. At 11:48 p.m., she was unpacking boxes in the living room when she heard it. A soft sound, like a chair sliding across wood upstairs. She froze. The house was empty. She had walked through every room. Closets. Garage. Basement. No one was there. She told herself it was settling. Old pipes. Wood expanding. Normal house noises. She went to bed. At 2:13 a.m., she woke up. Not from a sound. From silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy. Like something is waiting. Her bedroom door was slightly open. She was sure she had closed it. Slowly, she sat up. And that's when she heard it clearly. A whisper. Coming from the hallway. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just one word. Listen. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. Stepped into the hallway. Empty. The whisper stopped. Total silence again. She checked every room. Nothing. No open windows. No signs of entry. She barely slept after that. The camera. The next morning, she bought 2 security cameras. One for the front door. One for the hallway upstairs. She set them to record continuously. That night, she forced herself to stay awake. At exactly 11:47 p.m., something happened. The hallway camera flickered. Just for a second. Then returned to normal. Lena watched the live feed on her phone. Nothing moved. At 12:03 a.m., the bedroom door on the feed slowly creaked open. But in real life, she was standing in the hallway, and the door was already open. Her blood ran cold. She looked at the phone. The camera showed the door moving. But she had just walked past it. The footage didn't match reality. The audio. Panicking now, Lena replayed the hallway recording. At 12:03 a.m., The video showed her bedroom door opening. But the audio captured something else. A faint background sound, like static, and underneath it, breathing. Not hers. Slow, measured, coming from inside the walls. Lena felt her hands shake. She checked the house blueprint she had received during closing. There was an old utility space between the bedroom and hallway. A narrow cavity, large enough for wiring, large enough for ventilation, large enough for something to hide. She grabbed a flashlight and a screwdriver, removed the hallway vent cover, shined the light inside. Dust, wires, insulation, and something else. Scratches. Fresh. The discovery. Behind the insulation was a small device. Not a microphone. Not a standard bug. It looked like a compact audio recorder wired directly into the house's electrical system. She stared at it in disbelief. This wasn't random. Someone had installed it intentionally. And it was still active. The device had a small blinking light. Recording. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated. Answered. A calm male voice spoke. You found it quickly. Her breath caught. Who is this? You weren't supposed to notice for at least a week. Her legs went weak. Why is there a recording device in my walls? A pause. Then the man replied. Because the house needs to learn who lives in it. The line went dead. Lena stood frozen in the hallway. The house needs to learn. That wasn't random language. That was intentional. And suddenly, every whisper, every noise, every flicker on the camera, it wasn't paranormal. It wasn't settling wood. It was surveillance. The house wasn't haunted. It was listening. And whoever installed that device, they were still monitoring it. Lena looked around the dark hallway. The air felt different now. Heavier. Like she wasn't alone. Not physically, but electronically. Somewhere inside the structure, something was active. And she had just alerted it. Her phone lit up again. A new message. Unknown sender. Just 3 words. Stop removing things. Lena backed away from the wall slowly. The blinking device light reflected in her eyes. The house wasn't random. It wasn't abandoned tech. Someone had designed it this way. And now she had become part of the system. Outside, across the street, a car sat parked with its lights off. Inside, a man watched a tablet screen. On it, live audio from Lena's hallway. He smiled faintly. She's awake, he said quietly, and pressed a button. Inside the walls of the house, the device's light turned solid red. Recording intensified. And somewhere deeper in the structure, another signal activated. Not just listening, responding. Lena didn't sleep. Not after the message. Not after the red light inside the wall. She sat on her couch with the lights on, staring at the hallway like it might move. At 3:06 a.m., her hallway camera flickered again. But this time, she was watching the live feed closely. The video didn't glitch. It didn't freeze. It simply changed. For half a second, the image showed something that wasn't in her house. A different hallway. Older wallpaper. A child's drawing taped to the wall. Then it snapped back to normal. Lena leaned closer to the screen. She replayed the clip. It was there. Clear. Another house. Same layout. Different condition. And in the background, a voice. Muffled. Male. I told you it records everything. Her stomach dropped. The listing history. The next morning, Lena went through the property documents again. She had read them before signing. Nothing unusual. But now she noticed something she had ignored. The house had been sold 3 times in 5 years. Unusual for a newly renovated property. She searched public records. First owner, sold after 8 months. Second owner, sold after 3 months. Third owner, listed unexpected relocation. All 3 sales handled by the same real estate brokerage. And all 3 transactions completed below market value. Lena's heart beat faster. She called the real estate agent who sold her the house. No answer. She left a voicemail. Within 10 minutes, her phone rang back. The same calm male voice from the night before. You're investigating. Her throat tightened. Who are you? A pause. You should focus on living in the house. Why is there a device in my walls? Silence. Then, it's not just a device. Her pulse raced. What does that mean? Another pause. Then the line disconnected. The basement. Lena grabbed the house blueprints again. There was a basement layout. Finished. But something bothered her. The dimensions didn't match the exterior footprint perfectly. There was a small discrepancy. A narrow section between the foundation walls. She went downstairs. The basement was clean. Empty. Fresh paint. But in the far corner, behind a utility panel, she noticed something unusual. The drywall sounded hollow when tapped. She knocked gently. Different tone. There was space behind it. She fetched tools and carefully removed the panel. Behind it was not soil, not foundation, but a narrow corridor, concrete lined, not part of the original home structure. A flashlight beam revealed metal shelving inside, cables, servers, and a small power supply unit. Her breath caught in her throat. The house wasn't just wired for audio. It contained a private data hub, connected to the internal wiring. Someone had built infrastructure into the home itself. The pattern. She suddenly understood something terrifying. The whispers. The hallway video shift. The messages. This wasn't random surveillance. The house was being used as a behavioral testing environment. It monitored occupants, recorded their movement, tracked response times, even measured how they reacted to anomalies. The system wasn't meant to spy for theft. It was studying human behavior inside controlled architecture. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Do not access the basement systems. Lena froze. She hadn't told anyone about finding the corridor, which meant the system was detecting her actions in real time. Not just recording, analyzing. The files. Inside the basement server rack, she found a laptop connected to the system. It was unlocked. On the screen were folders labeled. Her occupant profiles, a behavioral metrics, a stress response data, a sound trigger logs. Her name was already there. Under occupant profile, it listed sleep cycle, irregular, movement speed, moderate, startle response, high, pattern deviation index, increasing. She felt sick. This wasn't random. She had been expected. She opened one more folder. It contained video files. Recordings of previous occupants. The first owner. The second. The third. Each file showed them reacting to the same stimuli. Hallway whispers. Door movements. Camera flickers. And each time, their stress levels increased. Eventually, they moved out. Every one of them. Not because of ghosts. Because they were being evaluated. The purpose. At the bottom of the folder was a document titled Residential Cognitive Adaptation Study. Lena read slowly. The house was part of an experimental program designed to test how people adapt to environmental anomalies. How long would they tolerate unexplained stimuli? Would they report it? Would they move? Would they confront it? The whispers, the video shifts, the red light device, all controlled triggers, designed to measure psychological resilience. Her phone rang again. This time, she answered immediately. I found your system, she said. There was a long silence. Then the voice responded calmly. Good. Why me? Because you were selected. Her breath caught. Selected for what? To see how quickly you detect manipulation. She felt anger rising. This is illegal. A soft chuckle. No one is being harmed. Except my sanity. You're not in danger, the voice replied. Unless you choose to escalate. Escalate how? A pause. By leaving. Her stomach tightened. The previous owners had all left within months. Was that the real objective? Not to trap people, but to measure how quickly they surrender territory when faced with uncertainty. Lena looked around the basement corridor. The system was still active. Recording. Monitoring. Learning. She realized something else. If she disconnected it, whoever was watching would know immediately. Which meant this wasn't just passive research. It was interactive. Her phone vibrated one final time. A new message. You have 24 hours to decide whether to remain. Below it, a countdown timer. 23 hours 59 minutes and 48 seconds. Lena stared at the screen. This wasn't about ghosts. This wasn't about spying for crime. It was psychological architecture. The house was a lab. And she was the subject. She closed the laptop slowly. walked upstairs, sat in the living room, and turned off all the lights. If the system wanted to measure adaptation, she would test it back. She would stop reacting, stop investigating, stop showing stress. Let the timer run. Let it observe her calm. Up the street, inside the packed car, the man watched the tablet screen. He smiled when he saw Lena go dark. "She's adjusting," he said quietly. On his display, her stress index was still high, but trending downward. "Interesting," he murmured. Then he opened another file. This house was not the only one. There were 12 more across the city. Different neighborhoods. Same systems. Same experiment. And Lena had just become the most responsive subject yet. Lena didn't leave the house. Not yet. If the system was measuring her behavior, running away would only confirm its theory. So instead, she did something unexpected. She started documenting everything. Every whisper, every flicker, every message. She recorded timestamps, reactions, and system responses. By morning, the countdown timer had reached 18 hours 22 minutes and 11 seconds. And nothing else had happened. No whispers, no glitches, no messages. Just silence. Which felt worse? The name on the servers. Back in the basement corridor, Lena powered the laptop back on. She navigated through the system files carefully. Most folders were encrypted, but one directory wasn't. It contained installation records, purchase orders, and a company name. Havengrid Systems. Her pulse quickened. She searched it online. Havengrid Systems was a private infrastructure analytics company. They specialized in smart building technologies, behavioral data modeling, and adaptive architecture systems. Their website used phrases like environmental interaction research, human structure dynamics, adaptive residential intelligence, no mention of surveillance, no mention of experiments, just vague corporate language. But under their leadership page, she found the name, Dr. Adrian Vale, founder and chief innovation officer. She clicked his profile. A polished photo, calm expression, mid-40s, background in cognitive engineering, former university researcher. His published papers focused on how humans respond to environmental unpredictability. One paper title caught her attention: Stress Response Patterns in Controlled Residential Variability Environments. Controlled residential variability. That sounded exactly like her house. The connection. Lena checked property records again. The house hadn't just been renovated. It had been purchased by Havengrid Systems 2 years before it was listed for sale. That meant the company owned it first, then sold it, which explained the unusual pricing and the repeated turnover. The house wasn't randomly retrofitted. It had been built into a research platform from the start. She scrolled through system logs. There was one external connection endpoint, an encrypted IP address, active, still transmitting data. She traced the location. The signal led to an office building downtown. Havengrid headquarters. The visit. Lena drove there immediately. She didn't call ahead. She didn't warn anyone. The building was modern. Glass exterior. Minimalist design. The lobby felt sterile. She approached the reception desk. "I need to speak with Dr. Adrian Vale." The receptionist smiled politely. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. It's about one of your residential systems." The smile didn't fade, but her tone changed slightly. "I'll notify his office." 5 minutes later, a man stepped into the lobby. Dr. Adrian Vale. Exactly as in the photo. Calm. Composed. He extended his hand. "Ms. Whitmore, I was expecting you." That stopped her. "You were?" "Yes. Your engagement metrics are quite impressive." Her stomach tightened. "You installed surveillance in my walls." He corrected gently. "Not surveillance. Feedback architecture." She stared at him. "What does that mean?" He gestured toward a conference room. "Would you like to discuss this privately?" Against her instincts, she followed. The explanation. Inside the room, Vale sat across from her. "We design adaptive homes," he began. "Our systems measure occupant stress in response to subtle environmental anomalies." "Whispers in the walls," Lena said. "Yes." "Camera distortions." "Yes." "Unknown messages." "Yes." Her fists clenched. Why? To study how humans interpret uncertainty in controlled environments. He leaned forward slightly. In modern society, people live in increasingly automated spaces. We wanted to understand how architectural unpredictability affects cognitive adaptation. That's not science, she said sharply. That's manipulation. It's research. Without consent. He paused. You signed the property agreement. She froze. He continued calmly. The contract included an experimental housing disclosure clause. It was written in standard form. She remembered skimming the paperwork, buried in legal language. She hadn't noticed anything unusual. We assumed informed buyers would opt out, Vale said. Very few read the full documentation. So this is legal. Ethically debated, he corrected. The real goal. Why the timer? She demanded. To measure whether occupants choose confrontation or adaptation. And if I leave, then the data indicates environmental stress exceeded tolerance. And if I stay, then the system adapts further. Her breath slowed. Further? He nodded. The next phase activates only if occupants demonstrate sustained resilience. What does that mean? He hesitated for the first time. Long-term integration. Her heart pounded. You're saying the house will change? Yes. Into what? A fully adaptive cognitive residence. She stood abruptly. You're building a living experiment. We're studying interaction. You're testing psychological boundaries. He met her gaze evenly. Yes. The choice. The timer on her phone now showed. 6 hours 14 minutes and 2 seconds. Vale glanced at her screen. I assume you found the server. She didn't answer. That's part of the protocol, he continued. Occupants who access infrastructure are flagged as high engagement subjects. What happens now? He smiled faintly. Now we observe whether you attempt to dismantle the system. She realized something unsettling. The whispers, the glitches, the red light. They weren't meant to scare her. They were designed to provoke curiosity. And she had followed every signal perfectly, exactly as the study intended. The hidden layer. Back home that evening, Lena disconnected the basement server from the power supply. The house lights flickered. For a moment, everything went silent. No whispers. No system feedback. She waited. Nothing happened. No alarms. No calls. No consequences. The house simply returned to normal electrical function. Had she shut it down? Or had she only disconnected a monitoring layer? She checked the hallway vent again. The device inside was still present, but inactive. The red light was off. For now. The final discovery. Before going to bed, she reviewed one last file on the laptop. It was labeled Long-Term Integration Candidates. Her name appeared there, alongside a status indicator. Phase 2 complete. Below it, eligibility for adaptive architecture deployment, approved. She felt her blood run cold. Phase 2. There were more phases, which meant the timer wasn't a countdown to eviction. It was a threshold. If she stayed beyond 0, the system would transition, not into surveillance, into permanent adaptation. The house would begin adjusting itself around her behavior. Lighting, temperature, layout suggestions, sound modulation, environmental optimization based on stress patterns. It wasn't about fear anymore. It was about control through comfort. Lena closed the laptop slowly. She looked around the quiet living room. The house felt different now. Not threatening. Waiting. She understood the experiment fully. It wasn't testing fear. It was testing dependency. Would she accept environmental influence if it made life easier? Would she trade autonomy for optimization? The timer ticked down in the background. And for the first time since moving in, Lena smiled, because she had decided something unexpected. She wasn't going to leave. And she wasn't going to destroy it either. She was going to expose it. Upstairs, the hallway camera light blinked once. Not red. Green. The system had registered her sustained presence. And in the Haven Grid headquarters downtown, Dr. Adrian Vale watched her live engagement metrics stabilize. He leaned back slightly. Interesting, he murmured. She's not reacting the way we predicted. A colleague beside him frowned. That means what? Vale smiled. It means phase 3 begins. Lena didn't sleep that night. Not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to hear it happen. At exactly 12 a.m., the house lights dimmed automatically. Not off, just slightly lower. She sat in the living room, watching, waiting, and at 12:01 a.m., the hallway camera activated again. But this time, she hadn't touched anything. The system had restarted itself. On the laptop in the basement, a new folder appeared. Phase 3 initialization files. She walked downstairs immediately. The servers were powered again. Not by the main breaker, by a backup internal system, which meant the house had dual control layers. She opened the Phase 3 folder. Inside were 3 documents. One labeled, Environmental Reconfiguration Protocol. One labeled, Behavioral Feedback Expansion. And one labeled, Occupant Integration Interface. The heart started pounding again. She clicked the first file, Environmental Reconfiguration. The document described automatic adjustments to room temperature, lighting tone, sound frequencies, airflow patterns, spatial suggestions, furniture repositioning prompts. But Phase 3 added something new. Microenvironmental stimuli, subtle scent releases, low-frequency vibration pulses, unnoticeable temperature shifts designed to influence mood regulation. Not enough to detect easily, but enough to alter emotional states over time. The goal wasn't to scare occupants anymore. It was to guide behavior. Gradually, Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. The whispers, the glitches, they had been Phase 1. The timer and warnings were Phase 2. Phase 3 wasn't about stress. It was about normalization. If she stayed, the house would slowly begin influencing her daily decisions. Sleep schedule, room usage, movement patterns, even work productivity, all optimized, all subtly guided. The system activated. Suddenly, the basement lights flickered. Not a failure, a sequence. She heard a soft hum. The air in the house changed. Barely noticeable, but real. She checked the thermostat. It had adjusted itself by 2 degrees. The hallway camera blinked. A message appeared on her phone. Phase 3 active. Welcome to adaptive mode. Below it, comfort optimization enabled. She immediately went to the main electrical panel and cut power to the basement. The hum stopped. The lights stabilized. But the phone notification remained, which meant Phase 3 wasn't dependent on the servers alone. It was embedded deeper, possibly in the wiring itself. The hidden network. Lena grabbed her toolkit again. This time she checked the attic. She hadn't inspected it yet. Pulling down the ladder, she climbed carefully. The attic was insulated. Standard. But near the center beam, she noticed something unusual. A small junction box. Not part of the original home blueprint. She opened it. Inside were fiber optic cables, connected to the house structure, directly integrated into the walls. This wasn't a retrofit. It was foundational. The house had been built with adaptive architecture from day one, which meant Haven Grid didn't just modify homes. They designed them to evolve. The call again. Her phone rang. Dr. Vale. She answered. I've disabled the basement servers, she said immediately. I know, he replied calmly. Then why is Phase 3 still active? Because Phase 3 is not located in the basement. Her eyes scanned the attic wiring. You embedded it in the structure. Yes. How? He hesitated slightly. Smart materials. The phrase made her freeze. What does that mean? The drywall, insulation, and subfloor contain embedded microsensors and response modules. They were activated remotely once Phase 3 was triggered. So the house itself is the system. Yes. There was no fear in his voice. Only pride. The ethical line. You never intended people to stay long-term, Lena said. That depends on the occupant. What does that mean? Some subjects demonstrate high adaptation scores. For those individuals, we test extended integration. And what is integration exactly? Vale paused before answering. The house becomes a partner in environmental regulation. Not surveillance. Collaboration. That's not collaboration. It is if the occupant consents. I didn't consent. You agreed to experimental housing terms. Her jaw tightened. That wasn't informed consent. It was legally documented. Silence. Then Lena asked the question she had been afraid to ask. What happens if I try to expose this publicly? Vale's tone changed slightly. Then Phase 4 activates. Her heart stopped. What is Phase 4? There was a long pause. And for the first time, Vale sounded serious. Public interaction simulation. Phase 4. It means the system begins testing how external communities respond to your experience. Meaning, we release anonymized data patterns to research networks. Media detection probability increases. Social feedback loops begin. Her mind raced. So you turn me into a case study? Yes. And if that fails, then we evaluate structural persistence. She felt cold, which means whether the house can sustain occupant resistance. Lena realized something critical. This wasn't just about studying individuals. It was about designing environments that could adapt to resistance. If she tried to destroy it, the system would counter-adapt and possibly escalate. The decision point. The timer on her phone had reached 45 seconds. She looked at it. The house was quiet. No whispers. No glitches. Just subtle comfort adjustments. Warm light. Stable air. It didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt pleasant. That was the danger. Comfort is harder to reject than fear. Vale spoke softly through the phone. You've demonstrated exceptional engagement. We're prepared to offer you a permanent integration agreement. What does that mean? Full adaptive control enabled. You would retain autonomy, but the home would continuously optimize your environment. Like what? Sleep regulation, stress reduction, productivity enhancement, safety monitoring, climate stabilization. And if I refuse, the system will reset to baseline. Meaning, you may experience intermittent anomalies until the evaluation period ends. She understood now. The house wasn't trying to trap her. It was testing whether she would choose enhancement over independence. The timer hit. 5 seconds. Vale's voice softened. The choice is yours. The counter moved. Lena took a deep breath and made her decision. She pressed record on her phone. Then she spoke clearly. This house is part of an unauthorized behavioral experiment conducted by Havengrid Systems. Adaptive architecture systems are being tested without meaningful consent. She walked through the house while speaking, filming everything. The vents, the attic wiring, the basement corridor, the embedded junction box. If you are watching this feed, she continued, I am publicly documenting the system. The house lights flickered, not randomly, but in sequence. Vale's voice came through her phone again. You're escalating. Yes, she replied calmly. The timer hit 0. For a moment, everything stopped. Silence. Then, the house switched modes. All adaptive systems disengaged. Lights returned to standard setting. Airflow normalized. Camera feeds froze. The aftermath. The next morning, Lena uploaded everything to an independent tech ethics board. Within days, journalists began investigating Havengrid Systems. It turned out she wasn't the first subject to question the system. 2 other homeowners had documented similar anomalies. The company issued a public statement claiming experimental misunderstandings. But internal documents leaked within weeks. Phase-based adaptive housing programs were suspended pending regulatory review. Dr. Vale resigned quietly. No criminal charges were filed immediately, but oversight investigations began. The house now. Lena chose to remain in the home, but only after the system was permanently disconnected. The embedded micromodules were deactivated through a certified shutdown protocol. The attic fiber lines removed. The basement corridor sealed. The whispering stopped. The flickers ended. The house became ordinary again. Just walls. Just wiring. Just a home. Months later, Lena received one final email. From Vale. It contained only one sentence. You passed Phase 3. She deleted it, and in a data center somewhere, the final status log updated. Subject Whitmore. Resistance threshold, high. Adaptation index, uncompromised. Integration declined. Study outcome, successful for evaluation, terminated for ethics review. The program paused indefinitely. Because sometimes the real experiment isn't about the house. It's about the human being inside it. and Lena had proven something important. Not every system deserves trust, and not every comfort deserves acceptance.